Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. It is Monday. We're going to start a brand new theme today. That theme is spoken word. We're going to be looking at tracks that have, well, at the very least, spoken word passages in them, but hopefully kind of have a majority of spoken word in them. Spoken word is a little bit different than rap. It tends to not have a rhythmic element to it. It is just speech that happens to be alongside music, rhythmic, textural, melodic ideas. To kick it off, we're going to be looking at something from Ulver. This comes off of the album Themes from William Blake's The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. We're going to be looking at track 7, Proverbs of Hell, plates 7 through 10. I have no idea what we're in store for. Ulver, if I remember correctly, is kind of different every time I listen to them, so I don't really have expectations going in. Let's just click it, see what's going on with this one.
Drive your cart and your plough over the bones of the dead. The road of excess leads to the path of wisdom. Prudence is a rich old caught by incapacity. He who desires but acts not breeds pestilence. The cutworm forgives the plough. Dip him in the river who loves water. A fool sees not the same tree the wise man sees. He whose face gives no light shall never become a star. Eternity is in love with the productions of time. The busy bee has no time for sorrow. The hours of folly are measured by the clock. To wisdom no clock can measure.
Well, unless something changes, this is just immensely ominous, creating a ton of tension. Some howling of the wind.
Folly is the cloak of knavery. Shame is pride's cloak. Prisons are built with sons of law.
What? Very bass heavy. You can see right here, the bass is so much larger than much of the mid and even higher end presence. Continuing to lean onto that ominous vibe. The overlapping vocal ideas creating anxiety. Very cool transition utilizing the glitched percussion. It's a really cool expansion of some of the ideas we've been through already. It really hasn't felt like too much has developed on the foundation. We've just explored new sounds on top of it. And we kind of still have spoken word in here. It's a little more rhythmic than I think I'd want to qualify it, but it's still kind of here. Ooh. Yeah, so the drummer's getting real playful. What era did this come out in? Ooh. When is this over? 27:16. Okay. So we're in the outro. it just moves into the next track. Okay, so that's less of an outro and more of an interlude, something to bring the next track in, because it's very divorced from the rest of the music that we heard there. It sort of abruptly cuts off where we were just to have this bass kick come in every once in a while. We didn't like smoothly move into that. Yeah, that's how I'm interpreting that last minute, last 45 seconds. All right. So it's interesting that this is written as plates 7 through 10. I see that all of the tracks on this album are a plate. Aside from the track intro, which comes in the middle of disc 1, everything is. Oh, there's also another intro on. Oh, there's two more intros on disc 2. It also doesn't start with plate number 1. There's probably a reason for that. But I assume we're going through. Nope, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I'm kind of curious now. Like, I want to dig into. Maybe I'll do that when we hit lyrics. I'll look at the Wikipedia for the album and see if there's a section for the concept. Because William Blake rings a bell. I don't know why. I've learned about the dude in the past sometime. And the fact that it's listed, all these songs are about plates of this concept. I don't know, I'm kind of curious about all that. But I kind of figured since it's plates 7 through 10, that's 4 plates right there. I was kind of expecting 4 sections to the song. We kind of only got 2. Our opening track sets the stage for what the song is going to be. It's ominous, it's tense, there is a hint of anxiety to it. It is not happy or positive in the slightest. It is a very dense atmosphere of minimal instrumentation. I think we had one synth and the bass kick, and that's all we had at the beginning. And then we had this very quiet spoken word section, but it also had this effect on it, this warble, where it kind of phases in and out of volume and fullness. Like it was shrinking and then expanding out while also reducing in volume and rising. It doesn't sound human, which, as I've mentioned in the past, is a fantastic way to create tension in your music, is to deliver vocals in an inhuman way. It's why harsh vocals tend to work really well when expressing extremities of ideas or alien concepts. Um, I mean, it's human, but it's not, and that's unsettling. And yeah, unsettling is actually a fantastic word for the entire first, was it 2-3 minutes of the track? And that's the intro. I think I'd have to get into the lyrics to figure out what specifically they're doing there, what they're aiming for, or what the purpose of the atmosphere is, but that's it. It's unsettling, it's tense, it's eerie, and there's a message that's being said. Now, something I haven't talked about yet, and I hope not to bring up too often this week, but it's possible that it'll come up a few times given it's the thematic tie between all 5 tracks for this week, is spoken word. I don't know why everybody uses spoken word, but when I've used spoken word in the past, it's to convey a clear message. I want to make sure that what I'm saying is fully understood. It's so integral to the art that I want to make sure that nothing obscures it. nothing that would come through in a musical sense. The timbre of my voice, the phrasing of it. Because when you sing, you don't necessarily use speaking patterns. Syllables don't follow the same flow as they would in speech, and so things can get misunderstood. Um, and just the generalities of misheard lyrics. So I use spoken word in order to get a message across as clear as I can. I don't necessarily know that that's why everybody does it, but I think that presenting the spoken word as it is in the beginning against basically nothing musically, just an atmosphere, is a good way to, at least for me, showcase that it is important. Important enough to provide pretty much devoid of most musical context. Now, the warble and the volume shifting and all that stuff, the effects put on the vocals certainly hide the words themselves. I couldn't tell you what was said there. I have no idea what the beginning was about. So it kind of goes against a little bit what I was expecting there, but the concept I think still stands that we don't really have spoken word in any of the sections where there's a lot of musicality going on. So, yeah, at least to me, there's a bit more emphasis placed there. All right, so then we have part two, which takes up the remaining like 70% of the track. It's very samey. There is a drum beat underneath that emphasizes the 4/4, and there are the occasional symbol accentuations going on, little ideas, little symbol rolls that help provide an extra characteristic to different parts of the phrase in order to keep it moving forward with some sort of non uniformity. It's still a rather short loop that the drummer tends to work within, but it allows that loop to feel a bit longer than if it was just four on the floor, which would feel rather repetitive because each beat is more or less the same. Or if you were alternating bass kick and snare, you would have a 2-beat phrase, which is short. The way that it works here, I think the drummer's working off of more of an 8-beat phrase, judging by the way that they accent specific sections of their pattern, and it gives it a little bit of extra oomph in the uh, in the linearity department. It feels less rigid and cyclical because of that. Musically, there's a few instruments here, but they all do either foundation work or atmosphere. There's no instrument that does melody work. You let me know if I'm completely forgetting something here, but I don't remember anything except the vocals being melodious. It works. We do have layers that come on here. We have a couple instruments that aren't present all the time. They're only there at certain sections, and so it does allow them to create a growing and reducing layering going on throughout some of the sections. It gives it a sense of growth across the like 6 minutes that we do this idea. And there are a couple of different chord progressions and even drum patterns that we go through to create some small variation and introduce some diversity into the track. But for the most part, we have this beat, four on the floor, giving us this. It's not four on the floor, but it emphasizes the 4/4. You can never lose the beat and an atmosphere that moves between two ideas. We have one that carries on the animosity, the ominous sound that we have from our intro. This is the first section we're in after our intro, and it basically takes what we were already doing and just expands upon it, filling out all the empty space that we had before. The other side is a bit more. I never quite figured it out. It's still dark, but it's brighter, maybe just lighter. I don't know. It has a hint of victory to it, but it isn't victorious. It's has a hint of positivity, but it's not happy. And it's still surrounded by a bit of this darkness, the moodiness of it all. I thought I was on the cusp of a word to describe it as we were getting closer to the end, and I ended up losing whatever word I was going to have. Right on the tip of my tongue, and I just never got it, and then it faded. I'm curious how other people feel about that section. Let me find it real quick just so y'all know what I'm talking about. Alright, I found it. It's kind of like this neutral feeling right here, and then we're going to lead into it feels a little bit lighter. And the thing is, too, is, I'd mentioned what era this came out in. That section, for whatever reason, feels kind of like 80s. Like sonically, I'd say it's industrial, given the drum sounds, some of the electronic synths going on, even particularly the vocal ideas, but compositionally, the chords being utilized, the notes played above them. 80s pop? Does anyone else get that? Am I just like way off on that? And I think that's what brings out some of the brightness to it, is that I do relate elements of it to pop music. Maybe it would be like later 80s, early 90s too. I kind of have a bleed over in my mental storage there. I probably should explore more older pop stuff, because like everything prior to the mid to late 90s, I kind of have an understanding of based on memory of when I was young. Mid to late 90s, I was a bit older, and early 2000s, I was in my teenage years. So I had begun playing music and beginning to learn how to interpret it a little bit better. I think I have a stronger understanding of those later 90s and the 2000s pop tracks, especially since I was growing up with those sounds um, in formative music years. But yeah, there's like this poppiness to it all that I don't know how to place. And that section shows up a couple of times here. It's interesting because it's not completely positive or happy. There's still a darkness sitting on the bottom, and there is a chord progression in there. I don't remember where it starts, but it introduces like a big hit of heaviness, of moodiness, and then the second chord comes in. It sort of dissipates most of that. We return back to what I kind of feel is more of an even weighting between the two. I'm really curious what this track is about, given the complexities of the emotional elements of it. Not only just that, but also the complexities of the vocals. Given that the music is primarily textural in most of this, the vocals have a heavy weight to bear, as their job is to push the song forward, to give it phrasing, to inject melody and harmony into it. And so the vocalist decides to take that task, that duty, and kind of do everything with it. We have the spoken word in our intro. We have semi-spoken word stuff throughout the track. It kind of borders on rapping at times. It's not quite the fast technical rapping, but it's also I kind of feel a bit too rhythmic to call it spoken. Spoken word, anyways. It's it's on the borderline, I think, between speech and rap. And I'm kind of curious how everybody else feels about those moments. I called them out during the reaction. Do you feel that those are spoken word sections, or is that clearly rap to you? It's certainly a slower type of rap, but there's a rhythmic cadence to it that spoken word typically doesn't have. Speech does have rhythmic cadences. They do have rhythm to them, but they're not dictated by the music around them. But at the same time, I tend to think of spoken word as poetry. And poetry does have does have rhythm and phrasing to it. We actually have meter built into a lot of poetry. So I don't know, maybe it is spoken word. I'm just thinking too hard about it. Regardless, we do have something that leans back into that. It isn't just for the intro of this track, it is something that is revisited throughout it. But aside from that, we also have singing. The singing is where the melody and harmony comes in. The melodies are diverse in the big picture. In the moment, a lot of the melodies tend to pick a note and sing around it, sort of mimicking stuff we would hear later on in the pop sphere. There are some wild jumps, but we tend to jump to a note and that becomes our new home. So we have some sections that are more of a mid-range pitch-wise for the vocalist, and then a section that is a higher range, and we tend to bounce back and forth between these two. What I find interesting is not so much the melodies themselves or the range themselves, but the harmony. There are two vocals singing in many of these sections. In fact, the segment I just played had two vocals in it. And I didn't really pick up on this until that moment that the vocals are not in tune with each other. In fact, there's a lot of intonation discrepancy going on when I think back on the track. It's an interesting division between the two voices. That given that the album is called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, we have a duality here. We also have a concept of marriage, which marriage is the joining of two things. In humans, marriages can be beautiful, but they're not always. Any relationship is going to have rough patches. I wonder if, especially given that this is the Proverbs of Hell, maybe that's where some of the darkness comes in, but the division between the two voices and the intonation discrepancy is an it's an allusion to heaven and hell, their relationship with each other, and sort of the rockiness between the two. I don't know. It's the only thing that I feel in here really has any. Oh, no, it's not. There is another level of division in this track, isn't there? And I've already touched upon it. The moody darkness that is present through most of the track, and that brighter, poppier weight being lifted off of you. That's still accompanied by a bit of darkness, but carries some more ethereal sounds and feelings with it. I had a tough time placing it, but yeah, this is a song, or at least an album, sorry, about heaven and hell, and duality probably the strong element of it, despite the fact that this track seems to specifically focus on hell. I think that about wraps up my analysis on this. I have more questions than anything else, and hopefully some of those get answered by the lyrics. Well, I am only left with more questions. Although it is, I mean, it's exactly as it says on the tin, Proverbs of Hell. This is just a series of proverbs. I'm missing the hell part though. It's proverbs are short phrases that have a meaning behind them. You know, don't throw stones in glass houses, right? That kind of thing. And this is just a list of those. There's like 100 in here. It just keeps going on and on and on. A fool sees not the same tree that a wise man sees. He whose face gives no light shall never become a star. Eternity is in love with the productions of time. The busy bee has no time for sorrow. The hours of folly are measured by the clock, but of wisdom no clock can measure. It's just line after line after line of these things. I think they're all supposed to come together for something. Each of the stanzas tends to, well, let me reiterate. The opening two stanzas, which I think are the spoken word sections, tend to have thematic ties to them, not necessarily what the stanza itself means, but sort of what the metaphor is utilizing. The opening one utilizes work and agriculture, farming, that kind of stuff. But as we go on, some of these stanzas end up being 20, 25 lines long. What they thematically cover, whether it's what the proverb is supposed to indicate or what the metaphor is told through, it doesn't quite get as connected as it does at the beginning when we just have 4 to 6 lines per stanza. There is an excess use of animals as the song goes on. But honestly, I don't get it. I mean, I do. Like I understand what's going on, but like why? I feel like this makes more sense in the context of the album, and I do think it is a concept album, so that probably makes sense. I'm also kind of curious why it's called Proverbs of Hell and not just Proverbs. Most of these tend to be more or less straightforward. I don't think any of these are negative or deceitful, as the typical use of Proverbs of Hell would indicate. However, it could also just be that these are Proverbs of Satan. And Satan is not a bad dude, depending on your perspective, right? But there's been a lot of, especially in metal, conceptual songs or albums about how Satan is more of a freedom fighter, pushing against the authority and uh, presenting a leader for individualism and freedom rather than the constraints of the Christian God. And from that angle, I think maybe that could be what they're going for here. Rather than just these being proverbs that would take you to hell, these are proverbs written by the devil in order to best live your life. I don't. Again, I don't really know. But a lot of the proverbs wind up being that you need to act, you need to do. Don't sit in stagnancy. Don't let your dreams go to waste. And don't hesitate to help your fellow people. In fact, the very first line is in seed time, learn, in harvest, teach, in winter, enjoy. It's about working together and making sure that the next generation knows how to continue doing what is necessary. In this case, on the surface, how to plant crops, but I think the idea is just passing knowledge down in general. That information is so important that it's how the song starts. And through that lens, it just seems like a bunch of little sayings to help you live your life to its fullest, to make sure that no dream goes untapped, that no worthwhile desire is left unacted upon, that anything you want to do, you should. You should at least try. Because if you don't try, there's no chance that you succeed. And there's a lot of proverbs about the foolish man is the one who does nothing. And that wisdom comes from experience and failure. There's a lot of that in here. But like, again, I keep coming back to it. Why? Why is this in the album? What does this have to do with the rest of everything? And why is it called Proverbs of Hell? What I don't, it's all going a bit over my head there. So, as usual, that's where y'all come in. This was my take on Ulver's Proverbs of Hell, plates 7 through 10. Let me know what you thought of it. You have your own perspective on things. Do you have a better grasp of what's going on here than I do? Let me know down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for this one. We do have a special selection coming up next. Pretty cool stuff with Puppet, who I think I've checked out before, but at least I have an idea of what kind of music they make, which puts me in a better position than starting off this track where I was like, I have no idea what I'm in for. That comes up, it's already live, no matter when you're watching this. Unless you've skipped ahead, in which case, that's weird. Why did you skip to the ending? Usually people would skip the ending. Anyways, rambling here. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.